What would you do today if you learned that tomorrow was the apocalypse? We'll just pause. Just like in the reading from Isaiah about building houses, we are repairing the house, and so some folks are working on the floor in the kitchen, and that's important because the floor needs to be safe and level for our preschoolers. So it's happening right now. So what would you do today if you learned tomorrow was the apocalypse? Would you eat all the tastiest food in your house, calories be damned? Would you get to your loved ones and hold them close? Would you sit on the cliff and soak up the beauty of the ocean? Martin Luther, the Protestant reformer and founder of the Lutheran Church, is attributed with this wonderful quote: "Even if I knew that tomorrow the world would go to pieces, I would still plant my apple tree today." I didn't know Miriam was going to be here when I decided to quote Martin Luther this morning, but she's looking at me smiling. It's a summation of his theology of living with faith and purpose, doing what is right in the present moment, and investing in the future despite uncertainty. This quote is almost the perfect opposite of what some of the Christians in Thessalonica were doing in the epistle that we read today. Anyone unwilling to work should not eat, for we hear that some of you are living in idleness, mere busybodies, not doing any work. Taken out of context, this instructive letter might sound like someone railing against freeloaders, people who don't work and want some kind of handout. And in fact, it's actually been quoted in Congress that way. But when we zoom out to actually read what the Bible says, we've been hearing from the Thessalonians for a few weeks, and we can actually see what the problem is. These Christians are expecting Jesus to come back any day.
So because he could come back any day.
So they were expecting him to come back soon, and they didn't see what the point in doing the work was. But the writer chastises them, insisting that they contribute to the life of the community, since they don't know when he will return. What made them think that Jesus was coming back so soon? He said so. He predicted the destruction of the temple in all of the Gospels, and the Mark version is probably the oldest, but we heard Luke today. In Luke, what we hear builds on a more sort of vague apocalyptic warning by adding in the description of exactly what happened when the Romans destroyed the temple in 70 CE to punish a Jewish rebellion, and what happened to the Christians in Luke's community who experienced persecution afterwards. They will arrest you, and you will be brought before kings and governors because of my name. They will give you this will give you an opportunity to testify. They will even kill some of you. Luke adapted the story to encourage his community that even though times were hard and scary, they still had the opportunity to share God's love and goodness, and somehow, through this endurance, to gain their soul. And of course, we know that the faithfulness of Christians in this time did indeed matter. Their brave testimony, despite persecution, caused many others to convert to a religion that preached hope and love in the face of oppression and violence. November is Native American History Month, and I've been reading books on that topic to the preschoolers here at Wondering Time. The first book I read was by a Cherokee author, and it was teaching quite a few Cherokee words. Don't ask me to repeat them now. They were tricky. All of the words and the message of the book imparted the idea that the Cherokee say, "We are grateful all year long, in all seasons, and no matter what is happening." As I have been struggling to maintain hope in the midst of all the attacks to our democracy and rule of law, that has been making me feel like maybe other people who felt like they were living in the end times. I've often thought about the Native American people who survived so much in our country, so much harm caused by colonization, genocide, boarding schools, and attempts to erase their culture, some of which worked, almost. On Monday, Sarah and I met with a woman named Kata Gomes from the Muchiate Land Trust. This is an organization, Muchiate leads, it's a woman-led organization, and it's focusing on cultural revitalization of the Ramaytush tribe. The Ramaytush was the Ohlone group that lived here on the peninsula. And Sarah and I reached out to Kata because we wanted to learn what Holy Family can do beyond the land acknowledgement that we have printed in our bulletins. So the first step that we can do, we learned from Kata, is for us to all learn more about the Ramaytush. And so we're going to invite her to come and speak to us. And we haven't scheduled it yet, she's really busy. But we will be doing that maybe on a Sunday and having her speak and have a chance to ask questions. And we'll invite other folks to come to that because I think it's a really cool opportunity. I don't want to spoil too much of what she might share with you all right now. I don't know, no spoilers. But I do want to share something that I learned from her on Monday. I learned that in the 1930s, a scholar from Berkeley declared that all the Ohlone were extinct. He couldn't find any more members from this huge umbrella group of tribes, and that were all related by a common language, or like related languages. He said they're gone, which obviously had a lot of implications for like what it means to have federal standing as a tribe and things like that. The thing is, they were not all dead. They had just gone underground to avoid the oppression that they were at risk of. Many of them used the Spanish names that the first colonists had given their families at the mission. And they were very careful to not let anyone know they were teaching their culture to their children, because if people knew that, the children would be taken to the boarding schools. We had 2 in California. And at the boarding schools, the heritage was abused out of the children. Some families stopped teaching the traditions altogether. It was just too much of a risk. But after the American Indian Religious Freedom Act passed in 1978, the boarding schools were closed and people didn't have to hide. A few decades later, Kata went to UC Berkeley because she wanted to learn the Ramaytush language that was long dead. There were 3 written sources documenting a total of about 300 words. That was all that was left. There were no recordings, and there was no insight into grammar, like the order of how you would structure a sentence, and then no insight into pronunciation. But there were recordings of neighboring languages. She worked with a doctoral student at UC Berkeley, and she began to reconstruct the language. Now they have enough of the language that she holds bi-weekly language classes, and also, and they're online. So more and more people are starting to learn this language that they've been able to reconstruct from learning the neighboring languages. She also has a bi-monthly basket making circle. you are welcome to attend these classes. If you want to learn Ramaytush or how to make a basket out of tule, unlike other tribes that have larger numbers and want to keep some of their traditions private as opposed to teaching them to everyone, there are so few surviving Ramaytush relatives that Kata does not believe in keeping the traditions only to them. Allies are needed to help keep the culture alive.
She got a point there, of course.
What an act of faith and hope she has undertaken in this reconstruction. And if you hear me even struggling over the word Ramaytush, it's because I learned I've been saying it wrong the whole time. And that, in fact, we were all spelling it wrong. It has two M's, and that you say them both. And so when we have our new Advent Bulletin coming out in a couple weeks, you will see
We'll make that modification will be there.
we correct the spelling. On Wednesday, I read a book to the preschoolers written by an Indigenous woman from British Columbia called Be a Good Ancestor. It was a slow process reading this book because first we had to learn what an ancestor is.
You know, you can just look up that word in a dictionary.
Yeah, but not if you're 3, right? If you're 3, you need someone to explain it to you at your level.
Or do the thing up for you, rather.
So what we learned for the 3-year-olds is that we all have ancestors.
No, duh. That's a given.
Hey, Wes, stop interrupting me. We all have ancestors, and one day we will be ancestors. I'd like to think by the end of reading this book, the children understood that what they do in their lives could impact their great-great-grandchildren. When we are afraid, when we are surrounded by chaos, we are tempted to stop planning for the future. That's why fear and chaos are tactics of oppression. As we all know, our 24/7 news and social media access fuel this fear, and our brains can get addicted to learning about the latest outrage, not realizing how this can paralyze us. We stop planting apple trees because we are distracted or hopeless. It is to a community experiencing this kind of fear that the prophet Isaiah shares these beautiful words of promise from God. For I am about to create a new heavens and a new earth. I am about to create Jerusalem as a joy and its people as a delight. No more shall the sound of weeping be heard in it, or the cry of distress. When you look closely at Isaiah's words, you can see that he's promising a reversal of everything that went wrong since Adam and Eve sinned in the garden. This is a reunion of heaven and earth, but in a new way. Not a return to that primordial garden, but a renewal of the big, bustling city of Jerusalem. A renewal of a modern way of life. This kind of hope and faith is the only antidote to fear and oppression. We can hold on to the belief that no matter what happens, we can keep God's love, God's justice, and God's promises alive. Just as some of Kata's ancestors planted the seeds that allow her to revive their language and culture now. Martin Luther trusted that if the apocalypse is coming, it wouldn't be the destruction of Earth. It wouldn't be a nuclear winter where we all had to take refuge in underground bunkers. It would be a new Jerusalem, a new Germany where he lived, a new United States, a new Half Moon Bay, and a new Ramaytush tribal land. Christian faith and hope demand that we get ready for it by planting our trees and planning for an abundant and just future. This new heaven and earth are coming into existence all around us, even amidst the violence, the oppression, and political injustice that we are living with. These things are our opportunity to testify to God's goodness and promise that the kingdom of God is among us. The only way violence and injustice win is if we give up on the future.